All right, so we went over the land of Canaan. We know that the Canaanites got Baal worship from Mesopotamia, which and that Canaanites and Phoenicians are synonymous, as well as the name Carthage. So now we're going to go into the religion of the Canaanites and the practices that their religion entails. We are then going to compare that to the religions in North America, in areas of the Mississippi Valley or the Mississippian cultures, and that of the northern, what would be considered northern or northwestern America. Okay, so this is Canaanite religion or Syro-Canaanite religions, which refers to the myths, cults, and ritual practices of people in the Levant during roughly the first 3 millennia BC. Canaanite religions were polytheistic and, in some cases, monolatristic. They were influenced by neighboring cultures, particularly ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamian religious practices. The pantheon was headed by the god El and his consort Asherah, with other significant deities including Baal, Anat, Astarte, and Dagon. Canaanite religious practices included animal sacrifice, veneration of the dead, and the worship of deities through shrines and sacred groves. The religion also featured a complex mythology, including stories of divine battles and cycles of death and rebirth. Archaeological evidence, particularly from sites like Ugarit, and literary sources, including the Ugaritic text and the Hebrew Bible, have provided most of the current knowledge about Canaanite religion. So, beliefs, afterlife beliefs, and the cult of the dead. Canaanites believed that following physical death, the NPS, usually translated as soul, departed from the body to the land of Mot, or death. Bodies were buried with grave goods, and offerings of food and drink were made to the dead to ensure that they would not trouble the living. Dead relatives were venerated and were sometimes asked for help. Cosmology. None of the inscribed tablets found since 1928 in the Canaanite city of Ugarit, destroyed circa 12,000 BC, has revealed a cosmology. Syntheses are nearly impossible without Hieroambolus and Philo of Byblos, circa 64 through 141 AD, via Eusebius, before and after much Greek and Roman influence in the region. According to the pantheon known in Ugarit as Ilhim, ILHM, or Elohim, or the children of El, supposedly obtained by Philo of Byblos from Sanchuniathon or Sanchuniathon of Berythus or Beru. The creator was known as Elion, who was the father of the divinities, and in the Greek sources he was married to Beruth or Berut, meaning the city. This marriage of the divinity with the city would seem to have biblical parallels too, with the stories of the link between Melquart and Tyre or Tyre, Chemosh and Moab, Tanit and Baal Hammon and Carthage, Yah and Jerusalem. The union of El Elyon and his consort Asherah would be analogous to the Titans Cronus and Rhea in Greek mythology, or the Roman Saturnus and Ops or Opus. The Canaanite mythology, there were twin mountains as a recurring motive. W.F. Albright, for example, says that El Shaddai is a derivation of a Semitic stem that appears in the Akkadian Shadu, or mountain, and Shadda'u, or Shadu'ah, mountain dweller, one of the names of Amaru. Philo of Byblos states that Atlas was one of the Elohim, which would clearly fit into the story of El Shaddai as god of the mountain or mountains. Harriet Lutsky has presented evidence that Shaddai was an attribute of a Shemitic goddess, linking the epithet with Hebrew Sad, or breast, as the one of the breast. The idea of two mountains being associated here as the breast of the earth fits into the Canaanite mythology quite well. The ideas of pairs of mountains seem to be quite common in Canaanite mythology. The late period of this cosmology makes it difficult to tell what influences, Roman, Greek, or Hebrew, may have informed Philo's writings. The mythology in the Baal cycle, Baal Hadad is challenged by and defeats Yam using two magical weapons called Driver and Chaser, made for him by Kothar Wakasis. Afterward, with the help of Athorat and Anat, Baal persuades El to allow him a palace. El approves, and the palace is built by Kothar Wakasis. After the palace is constructed, Baal gives forth a thunderous roar out of the palace window and challenges Mot. Mot enters through the window and swallows Baal, sending him to the underworld. With no one to give rain, there is a terrible drought in Baal's absence. The other deities, especially El and Anat, are distraught that Baal had been taken to the underworld. Anat goes to the underworld, attacks Mot with a knife, grinds him up into pieces, and scatters him far and wide. With Mot defeated, Baal is able to return and refresh the earth with rain. The practices. Religious practices. Archaeological investigations at the site of Tel es Safi, or Safi, have found the remains of donkeys, as well as some sheep and goats in early Bronze Age layers dating to 4,900 years ago, which were imported from Egypt in order to be sacrificed. One of the sacrificial animals, a complete donkey, was found beneath the foundations of a building, leading to speculation this was a foundation deposit placed before the building of a residential house. It was considered virtually impossible to reconstruct a clear picture of Canaanite religious practices, but child sacrifice by the Canaanites was known to surrounding peoples. According to K.L. Knoll, under the duress of military crisis, human sacrifice was offered to the divine patron of a besieged city, as well as the sacrifice of prisoners of war to the victorious God. Ronald Hindle believes the Israelites disparaged the Canaanite religion because they wanted to disassociate themselves from their Canaanite ancestors and form a new national identity. Canaanite religious practice had a high regard for the duty of children to care for their parents, with sons being held responsible for burying them and arranging for the maintenance of their tombs. Canaanite deities such as Baal were represented by figures which were placed in shrines, often on hilltops or high places, surrounded by groves of trees, such as is condemned in the Hebrew Bible. In Hosea verse 13a, which would probably hold the Asherah pole and standing stones or pillars. Funerary rites. Funerary rites held an important role in Canaanite religion and included rituals to honor the deceased and to feed the NPS, the origin of the Hebrew word for soul, as it moved on to Mot, the land of death. Rituals to honor the deceased included offerings of incense, libations, music, the singing of devotional songs, and sometimes trance rituals, oracles, and necromancy. Excavations in Tel Megiddo have offered greater insight into Canaanite funerary practices. A large number of wine vessels have been found in the graves there, as well as vessels of beeswax, animal fat, olive oil, resin, and even vanilla. These grave goods may have been used as part of a funerary feast, as offerings to the dead, or both. Additionally, evidence of opium use was found at a late Bronze Age site in the southern Levant. The presence of grave goods may suggest similarities between Canaanite practices and the ancient Egyptian custom of providing the deceased with supplies for the afterlife.